The following report has been produced for the Real News Network by the Irish MediaBite project. See MediaBite.org. I'm Harry Browne. This week, the future of a union of 27 countries and 500 million people will be decided by the citizens of one of its smallest member states in a referendum that will probably have a victory margin of just a few thousand votes. 3 years ago, the European Union withdrew its proposed constitution after French and Dutch voters rejected it in a referendum. On Thursday, that constitution is back, but reformulated as a huge and highly technical treaty, the Lisbon Treaty, to amend previous EU treaties. And Ireland is the only country whose own constitution requires a referendum to get such a treaty ratified. The powers that be in Ireland are pushing hard for a yes vote. The powers that be in Europe are trying to help. But with a motley assortment of groups from left to right opposing the treaty and getting some of their own help from across the continent, the outcome is too close to call.
We're joined in Dublin by one of the leading opponents of the Lisbon Treaty. Joe Higgins is a Socialist Party activist, sometimes called the Socialist Party leader, and a former member of Dáil Éireann, the main house of the Irish Parliament, which is just across the road from us here. Joe Higgins, some of the viewers, particularly in other parts of the world, may be confused. Ireland has surely done well out of Europe from a position of poverty, and Europe has surely done well out of the EU. I mean, some people might think the EU, well, that's about ease and prosperity. It's a byword for good social welfare state and a benign view of military affairs. What's the problem with Europe?
Well, the people who are advocating yes vote in this treaty would have us believe that the EU and all its institutions was like a cuddly bear, a nice, friendly kind of institution. In fact, the EU is really a massive marketplace, and with 500 million people, it is a very, very powerful capitalist market, really, which in fact is the primary reason that the European Union was set up by the elites within Europe. And in the current world situation, it sees itself as organising to be able to stand and rival the power economically of the United States, and then other rising powers like China. And also what the Lisbon Treaty is partly about then is equipping this huge new economic bloc with a military machine and a foreign policy that will allow it to go onto the world stage and throw its weight around essentially in the same way as the United States, led by George Bush in the past 8 years, has done, in order to protect what they call in the treaties of the European Union the strategic interests of the Union. And what strategic interest means really is essentially has to be the interests of the major corporations, big multinational corporations, which dominate the economies of the European Union. Many of them would be household words even in America and Canada, like Siemens, Nestle, Royal Dutch Shell. These are all the huge players within the European Union. They are quite well organized together. One particular lobby is called the European Roundtable of Industrialists. 40 of the biggest multinationals based in the European Union, which meet regularly and have a consistent approach to the institutions of the European Union to ensure that their economic policies are met. And it was really in response to their pressure that over the past period we've had huge tendencies towards the privatization of public services within the European Union and attacks on the wages, conditions, working conditions and pension rights of workers, all in the interest of maximizing the profit of these very powerful economic entities. So really when the leaders of the European Union speak about it being simply a space of democracy and peace and human rights, I'm afraid we have to look behind that reality and to see what are the real interests. It's quite like people quoting the United States, the Constitution, and fine declarations about human rights, but that hasn't prevented the United States government for 50 years from supporting every vile dictatorship virtually in Latin America, for example. It's not dissimilar in Europe, really.
What you're describing there doesn't sound very much like a democratic institution, even by the debased standards of that word. Does the Lisbon Treaty make it worse in any significant way?
The Lisbon Treaty contains significant changes which enhances the neoliberal agenda, by which we mean the pressure for further privatisation of public services, and it also provides for an intensification of the militarisation of the European Union. It also does not add in any sense to workers' rights, which the yes side in this current debate is trying to suggest that it would, by virtue of what's called the Charter of Fundamental Rights being included in the Lisbon Treaty.
That sounds very nice, a Bill of Rights for Europe.
Well, you see, there is a Charter of Fundamental Rights, and in theory many of the rights we would absolutely agree with. And we want more rights for working people and ordinary people in their communities. But unfortunately, when it comes down to brass tacks, as we say, the European Court of Justice, which adjudicates on disputes between labour and workers in unions, has on all occasions taken the side really of business interests and put their right to trade and to bring services across borders and to exploit workers in the process. They have put that right ahead of the right of workers to strike against that. But anyway, if we come back to the public services,
Yes.
perhaps.
Please, yes.
Yeah. This is a crucial issue for us in this particular treaty. Now, there has been big pressure for privatisation from the big conglomerates, because obviously they want to extend their profit-making abilities and possibilities within the European Union, as indeed they do throughout the world, which is a process that's been going on in Latin America, in Africa, and so on for many years now. But the key change that is made here is that up until now, each member state of the European Union had a veto, which means they had an absolute block to attempts to force trade agreements upon them from the World Trade Organization, the WTO for example, which would include within it, say, a proposal that their health services would have to be opened up as of right to multinational corporations, for example, American medical corporations seeking profits, that they would have to open up those as of right, competition, etc., in medicine and in other areas. Now, Lisbon proposes removing that veto so that in the future, trade agreements coming from the WTO process could be foisted on countries by what's called a qualified majority vote in the Council of the European Ministers, so that no single state can say, stop, we will not open up our services. Now, we have highlighted this very much in the course of the current campaign, because if that veto is gone, it's not, to be honest, that we have great confidence in the current Irish government, which is a right-wing government that has unfortunately privatised parts of our health service already, but we can change that government